Hello students, now with the completion of the poem The Wasteland, we are to begin with Osborne's play Look Back in Anger that came out in the year 1956. So after the Second World War, a new era in the history of Great Britain emerged. The Labour government that was voted to power in 1945, it slowly but steadily dismantled the British Empire, and even after the Conservative government which came back to power in 1951, it could not discontinue or reverse the process that was set in by the Labour government. During this era, there was also an emphasis on the Church of England, class distinctions and middle class morality, because there was a loss of faith, and the support that the bishops of the church extended to nuclear weapons, it antagonized progressive opinion. There was also some social leveling under the Labour dispensation, and the disparity between the classes, it marginally got diminished. Also, after the First World War, there was a liberalization of sexual mores. Prudery that was so very much emphasized upon during the Victorian period, it got decreased during this era, and sexuality became less of a taboo. During this period, a new generation of writers emerged, and they produced The Angry Young Man. So it was a literature of protest that they were producing. During this period, the characters that they produced were generally, for this kind of a literature of protest, the characters that they were producing were generally disturbed, anguished, angry, desperate, but at times funny, pouring out invectives against the society and its codes and institutions in a very seething and vitriolic rhetoric. Jimmy Porter in the play Look Back in Anger is one such character. Also, we see that in Look Back in Anger, characters are produced or presented, they act as each other's foils. Jimmy is set against Cliff and Helena against Elizen. As Osborne himself mentions at the very outset of the play, that Cliff is a soothing natural counterpart to Jimmy. He is easy and relaxed, as opposed to the vitriolic and volcanic Jimmy, who is his friend. Also, Cliff is loving and soothing to Jimmy's women, and especially he is very submissive in contrast to his domineering friend Jimmy. Elizen, Jimmy's wife, she is the subdued wife who never protests or retaliates against Jimmy's brutal treatment of her, and she is contrasted with the assertive and outspoken Helena, who is determined to retaliate whenever she is antagonized. Also, Look Back in Anger, a play that appears to be revolutionary in content, is, we see, old-fashioned in form. Its structure, it resembles that of the conventional well-made play. The overall pattern of the play is circular, that is, things roughly, they seem to end where they began. So let's briefly go through the life and works of John Osborne, the playwright. Osborne, he was born to Thomas Godfrey, who was a commercial artist, and Nellie Beatrice, who was a barmaid, and he was born on 12th December 1929 in a London suburb. He was interested in the theatre and tried his talent for acting at the Empire Theatre in Sheffield in a play called No Room at the Inn. Later he became a manager and playwright as well. So it was with the play Look Back in Anger that Osborne was finally acclaimed as a dramatist. So there was an advertisement in the stage seeking new plays on contemporary themes, and particularly new plays by new writers. and about 700 entries they poured in through post in reply to this advertisement. And this Look Back in Anger, the play that came by post by the author, who was a young out-of-work actor, Joan Osborne. The English stage company is set up at the Royal Court Theatre, and it staged the play successfully on 8th May 1956. So after it was staged successfully on 8th May 1956, Look Back in Anger, it sparked off the theatrical revival of the 50s, and it is almost like a caricature of the position. Its dilemma is first that the older and traditional loyalties of patriotism, family, manners, public service and so forth have come to seem absurd to a post-war generation. There are no new values, and allegations have taken place of those empty shibboleths. Jimmy's voice is a genuinely modern voice. It is witty, relentless, pitiless, and utterly without belief in anything, because he cannot find himself a place. He must compensate himself by making fun of all those who can, and his wit is stinging. With this play, Joan Osborne became a prophet for a young generation demanding to be heard and given a purpose. He widely came to be known as an angry young man. Osborne, he was much married man. He married many times. His first marriage was to the actress Pamela Elizabeth in 1951. Just after his divorce, he married another actress, Mary Urey, in 1957. After divorcing her, he again married a journalist, Penelope Gillette, in 1963, and then finally he got married in 1968 to a girl named Jill Bennett. These are a few plays by Osborne: The Devil Inside Him, Personal Enemy, The Entertainer, etc. etc. So we'll see Joan Osborne as an angry young man, or Jimmy in Look Back in Anger, who is a representative of an angry young man. To begin with, George E. Wellworth's comment that the new movement in the British drama actually began officially on the night of May 8, 1956, when Joan Osborne's play Look Back in Anger, it opened at the Royal Court Theatre in London. The reviews were generally favourable. Kenneth Tynan gave it an extra thrust when he wrote, "I doubt I could love anyone who did not wish to see Look Back in Anger. It is the best young play of its decade." So an extra appreciation was thrust upon the play by Kenneth Tynan. Overnight, Osborne, who was previously an obscure provincial actor, he became famous. The time was most opportune for this play, in fact. The critics and the public were long waiting for something new. This drama gave a new relief to the people of the lost generation, and it put an end to the elephantiasis afflicted plots. England badly needed a turn which was given by this rebellious play. On the American Eve, there were Arthur Miller and T. Williams. England now at least could boast of one play which satisfied the tension-afflicted people after the Second World War. Look Back in Anger was a rallying point. It came to represent vast dissatisfaction, which had so powerfully grown and which was reflected in the novels of such young writers as John Wayne, Kingsley Amis, and Joan Bryan. Jimmy Porter was thought to symbolize the fury of the young post-war generation that felt itself betrayed, sold out, and irrevocably ruined by its elders. The older generation had made a complete mess of things. This was what the younger generation believed. There was nothing the new generation could do except withdraw and indulge in the perverse and vicarious pleasure of nursing its resentment. In short, nothing except to cry like a beaten dog. Jimmy Porter represents this class, which believes that it didn't have anything to rely on or anything to fall back on. He was educated and cultured, a university graduate, but he had to support himself by candy shop in the streets. What a pity, what a fault of his. Society seems to be rotten, that there is no longer any point in attempting to be useful. Nobody is happy to be perverse. It is what the age makes the young to be so. It is not that Jimmy is content to stagnate. He just feels that he has no chance. Helena says about him, he was born out of his time. He withdraws into his cell or his own personal morbid world because there is no other choice left for him. He disgruntles against the society and the system, for he feels himself to be very harshly treated and unjustly crushed down with no apparent hope of ever getting up again. He reminds one of a fighter who has been knocked down and instead of getting up again just lies there spitting insults at his opponent and griming with sardonic masochism whenever the latter kicks him in the ribs. George E. Wellworth again asks a question, but is this what Osborne intended when he wrote this play? What Wellworth feels is that the eager critics have gone far into finding enough material for the lost generation and the post-war disillusionment. Actually, Osborne himself must have never imagined the various interpretations attributed to his experimental play. He must have been the most surprised man in England when he suddenly found himself at the head of the angry young man movement. According to Wellworth, Osborne had written a carefully and intelligently worked out dramatic study of a psychotic marriage relationship, and he was hailed instead as the creator of a revolutionary literary movement, the Angry Young Man movement. Certainly, Jimmy Porter makes a good many cutting remarks about society, but he only makes them as a result of his own peculiar personality problems. There is absolutely no indication in the play that Osborne ever intended Jimmy's remarks to be taken as a general condemnation of society. Jimmy Porter is an extremely musical young man and anything but representative of the young man of our time. Jimmy's rantings are always the natural outgrowths of his psychotic state. These are a defense mechanism he uses to hurt his wife, whom he suspects of being imperfectly devoted to him. There is no real sense, no mature criticisms in these remarks. Look Back in Anger was strenuously fiddled up into an epoch-making play by the London critics. It is nothing of the sort, but on the other hand, it is by no means a worthless play either. Osborne has created an excellent, minutely accurate dissection of a perverse marriage in the style of Strindberg. Jimmy's problem is not the vicious injustice and hypocrisy of the social order. It is his suppressed awareness of the insoluble psychological paradox caused by his desperate overriding need to possess a woman complete, unquestioning love, and his simultaneous constitutional inability to get along with anyone, any woman. His outbursts are the overflow of his bitterness whenever his wife fails to measure up to the standards of devotion that he expects for her. At the same time, he knows them to be impossible. That he is expecting too much from a woman. He is like a Dostoevskian hero who tortures himself by torturing others. Jimmy is a sort of man who needs but is too proud to demand absolute devotion. He dislikes the upper class because his wife belongs to it. It is effete and useless because it looks down upon him. So his quarrel does not seem to be with the world but with his wife. He has his own ideal, and his tragedy is that he will never find them fulfilled. Dyson says about the play, in Jimmy Porter, one is confronted with a man whose anger undoubtedly starts in human idealism and the desire that men should be more honest, more alive, more human than they normally are. Very soon, however, corruption creeps in. Jimmy's sense of outrage is so little controlled by either selflessness, stoicism, or any other discipline of the mind that it readily degenerates into moods profoundly destructive to life. The alarming juxtapositions in his makeup, with a holy crusade against stupidity on the one side and a neurotic shrinking from in-laws and church bells on the other, it cannot be escaped. His motives are hopelessly mixed. His targets are inconsistent. He lashes at times at Cliff both for not reading the New Statesman and for reading it. He taunts his wife with her education and Cliff with his ignorance. From the very beginning, it is clear that rightly or wrongly, he has not acquired the normal techniques for accepting suffering, and that he regards his morbid sensitivity to it as evidence of moral superiority. That he is more sensitive, he feels, and that's why he feels that he is superior to his wife Eliza, who is less sensitive to suffering. He becomes convinced that he is the only one who really knows what suffering is, and that he has right to scourge those less agitated than himself. There are marked symptoms of persecution complex, both in the tenacity with which he clings to his working class origin as an occasion for masochism, and in the readiness to see his wife's continued correspondence with her parents in terms of conspiracy and betrayal. So it is significant in the play that Eliza and Cliff, and later Helena, they feel that Jimmy is basically worthwhile. They may not accept his ideas, and Eliza at one stage decides that her sanity depends upon getting away from him, but they never doubt that his torment is at root that of a good man, and that he deserves success, whether he has the secret of finding it or not. Also, they sense that his anger has in it elements of honesty and courage that might be redemption if they could not be released into effective action. That's all for today. Thank you so much.